All right, we'll just go ahead and dive in. Week three. If you weren't around for week 1 and 2, to be honest, you are just going to go more in depth of what was in week 1 and week 2. So you're in the right space, you're in the right location. You two, especially Jana and Oleg, you're all right. You're good. Yeah, so basically this is, it is showing, so we've been going through different sutras to kind of show the correlation and the connection between Black culture and the erotic. And basically what I do is I break down a sutra and I kind of, I discuss it. It's not like a full-on discussion. It's just more like I kind of give thoughts and insights into kind of pulling it apart to show that sort of connection and correlation. So this week is Eros is an invitation to unconditionality. Eros guides and trains us from the inside out, operating by non-rational principles or natural law. Do not confuse irrational with non-rational, for the latter is a system of order that is the equal complement to the rational, orderly, thou shalt legislated aspects of the mind. Eros is a natural process, a life force that converts internal buildup, stagnant emotion, and untapped resources into energy, sentience, the capacity to accurately perceive our environment and acknowledge it with pitch perfect response. This translates into a felt sense of intimacy with our lives, being one with, seeing the inner secrets of all we encounter. In turn, this intimacy is the conduit for inspiration. We discover and are moved by an inner undomesticated wisdom rather than conform to a set of standards aimed in a generalized way to be applied to unique individuals. The promise of the ordered path is that we will become more like those on the path. The promise of Eros is that we will become fully who we are. On the ordered path, not only are we protected, but we are prohibited from entering certain domains of life. Eros walks a different path. Having reverence for all, it embraces a take no prisoners approach to knowing this life by living it until we can recognize the indwelling divinity of all things, regardless of their appearances. Eros then demands we develop acuity of perception rather than the mere capacity to conform. The realization of Eros is always art, where beauty is not determined by content or form, but by the congruence of truth that runs through it. From the profound to the profane, the invitation of Eros is to incarnate into our own lives, the wisdom of intimacy, the refuge of connection. The irrefutability of contact with this life, of moving and being moved, is how we discover that every raging fire is actually friendly, that there is only this life asking to be known on its terms, on its own terms. To absorb, convert, see, and love all of what is unconditionally. This is the invitation, the work, and the promise of Eros. All right, so to me, and again, I say to me not to, sometimes people say like to me to kind of dismiss what they're saying. And I actually say to me to kind of let you in on exactly how I'm thinking about things. And then you're invited to kind of look at it or roll it around or wrestle it or whatever it is you want to do with it. So to me is usually more invitation of, hey, here's how I see it. And in my world, in most moments, that is the correct way of seeing things until it's different. So to me, ultimately, this sutra kind of speaks in terms, as it speaks in terms of Blackness, it just speaks in terms of resilience. And so, just bottom line for everything, unconditionality is the key to resilience. Resilience is the key to resonance, flow, and presence. All those things, we haven't, I don't know how much everyone knows about eudaimonia, but we'll just say like all those things are the bedrock to flourishing into your life, to really be exactly who you are. You need to have a resilience to actually continue to bring those things out about yourself, or the pieces of yourself that have been hidden, that have been locked away, that have been armored, that are deemed not culturally or socially acceptable. You have to have a certain resilience to continue to bring those out. And then you have to have resonance to bring those out in the right moments that they're needed. And then once they're brought out in the right moments that they're needed, there's a flow. And in that flow, you're present, right? So it's kind of all those things kind of meld together. And that's literally all I do on these talks, really. I'll have kind of like stuff I want to talk about, but it'll kind of come out the way it comes out. And so I just kind of try to make myself available for it. So there are kind of three major points that I'll go over from the Sutra. And one is Eros as an inner guide. So that's number one. And that is like Eros operating through those non-rational principles or natural law guides us from the inside out versus being guided from the external. And in saying it that way, to me, I start to think about like, okay, well, you want to look at like the whole thing about like the chicken and the egg kind of comes up, where it's like, oh, well, what comes first? And erotically, I would say that the interior kind of comes in first. Everything's kind of it's kind of either reflected back or responded to or often reacted to from what's actually happening in the internal. Only most of the time, quite a lot of us, like just across humanity, think that it's the external, right? And so like we kind of gloss over the internal. Things happen so quickly that there's not enough space to actually see that there's an internal thing happening. And it doesn't super matter what the external thing is. It's the same way that like people can say, one person could say like, your father sucks to 10 people, and 9 out of 10 people would be like, no, he actually doesn't. And then the one person could be like, no, he actually does. So it's like, it's not necessarily the external thing that's occurring. It is what happens internally. And so if you're guided from the inside out, then without navel gazing, you kind of have to see like what is happening internally. And I think in some ways like that can be very hard because that can be easily kind of gotten into. But if there is and this is going to come later, actually, if there is a more felt sense of what's actually happening internally, if there's more of an incarnation into your body and therefore into your life, that space of you're not thinking about what's happening internally. You're actually just feeling it and moving, right? And it's not a reaction, it's a response. And so kind of all these things are kind of at play, right? And so when you're moving from the inside out, you find the divinity of all things, regardless of appearances, which means regardless of what's actually happening in the exterior. And it is that spot of really having to understand, you have to be aware and conscious of your perception versus like kind of conforming to what happens and then moving. And I think that kind of the easiest way to think about that is if you were here last week, there was a spot where it was like being able to, and I'll actually kind of go over this again, but like being able to conform, quote unquote, conform to what's needed in the moment is a high ordered practice. It's a very high kind of practice. But it's only a high practice if you're doing it without it being transactional. Like if you're doing it to get something, then it's not a high practice at all. You're just like, it's just lies and conditioning, meeting lies and conditioning. But if you're actually doing it because that's what's called in the moment, because internally you can feel whether or not you consciously are thinking that that's occurring, you can actually feel, hey, this is what is needed in the moment. I'm going to be that. I'm going to give that. I'm going to offer that without regard to what you're going to get in return. That is a high order practice. And so I'm going to take this to a really funny spot, or at least I think it's funny. We'll see. Magical Negro. The Magical Negro. Okay, so I'm going to read a Wikipedia piece, right? So the Magical Negro is a trope in American cinema, television, and literature. In the cinema of the US, the Magical Negro is a supporting stock character who comes to the aid of white protagonists in a film. The characters often possess special insight or mystical powers, have long been a tradition in American fiction. The Magical Negro typically, but not always, is some way like outwardly or inwardly disabled, either by discrimination, disability, or social constraint. The Negro is often a janitor or a maid or a prisoner. And I will say that in that a janitor, maid, or prisoner, if they do their jobs well, they are essentially high-level alchemizers. They're just converting. That's it. It was, actually I won't go, well, no, it was popularized in 2001 by Spike Lee. While discussing films with his students on a college tour, he was upset that Hollywood kind of continued to employ this premise. He said that the films like Green Mile and The Legend of Bagger Vance use the super duper magical Negro. And it is, the critics use the word Negro because it is considered archaic in modern English. This underlines their message that a magical Black character who goes around selflessly helping white people is a throwback to stereotypes such as the Samba or the noble savage. The character often has no past, but simply appears one day to help the white protagonist. Now, yeah, so we spoke last week about I spoke last week about that resonance, like that being able to be what is needed in the moment, right? That's the magical Negro right there, literally, right? But the patient is often patient and wise. The character is often patient and wise, dispensing various words of wisdom and is closer to the earth. The character will do almost anything, including sacrificing themselves to save the white protagonist, as exemplified in the Defiant Ones, in which Sidney Poitier plays the prototypical magical Negro. So this shows up to me in a few different ways, but like the main way that it kind of shows up is like, so an archetype in a certain way is a stereotype, right? And it kind of feels like stereotype is negative and archetype is positive, you know, in the way that they're talked about. But it is an archetype. The place where it becomes stereotypical is when everyone kind of forgets what's actually happening underneath. And what's actually happening underneath is, number one, there's a dehumanization that's happening. And I think that's why it kind of keeps being portrayed. There is that kind of savior that is being looked for what is this wisdom? Like there's wisdom that is to be had. How come I can't have it? It's like we were talking a while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, about like the art of soul making. And again, you know, I'm just gonna say certain things, like you mull it over, you know, take it in as deeply as you want to. You know, we were looking at the art of soul making, and then we were looking at like, okay, well, if you had like the art of soul making for Black people, what does that mean? And then it's like, well, there's art of soul making. And then there's like, well, Black people are soul. So there's no soul to be made there. There's a soul to be uncovered in a certain way. But there's this quest to find a soul. There's this quest to find the erotic, really. There's this quest to find the feminine balance to the overwhelmingly masculine culture. And that is why that archetype / stereotype keeps coming into play. And I think the stereotype part of it comes into play where it's like it's the lowered, dehumanized aspect of things where it's like, oh, they're a janitor or a prisoner. Who looks at janitors or prisoners on a day-to-day basis? Who gives respect to those people? Most people don't. Even though, you know, like I said, if they do their jobs well, they're powerful. There's a lot of power in all of that. There's a lot of power in like, you know, I'll do seva around the land and I love to sweep. My mom loves to sweep. My grandmother loved to sweep. My great-grandmother loved to sweep. I say I come from a long line of sweepers. And I had a friend tap me one day and she was like, I can see what you're doing when you sweep. I can see exactly what you're doing. And I was like, well, don't tell anybody, because like it's gonna keep it going. But you know, you're clearing something. You're like, you're alchemizing, you're converting something. You're converting what's in the air. And that is kind of the main thing. But if you are wanting to feel like you're respected in a certain way without giving, like, if you need the respect from out here versus having it within here, and that is needed, like that role is needed, you're not going to bring it. Or if you do, it's going to be something like transactional, right? And then it's not going to be real. You're not actually going to be doing the thing that needs to be done. You're not going to be offering the thing that needs to be done. You're just there to get what you want to get and hope that like the person who's paying you is getting what they want, but nobody's actually getting what they want. Nobody's actually genuinely getting what they want. So, Magical Negro. Another way this actually shows up is I didn't go in depth in the studies, but I remember hearing these studies, and it was a lot around Black women giving birth, like in hospitals and stuff. And there was these studies that were showing, like amongst like medical professionals, that that they felt like Black people, quote unquote, Black bodies, were able to take more, they had a higher threshold for pain. And so they wouldn't offer them pain meds. They wouldn't do things that would help alleviate pain. And, you know, there's a lot of like stuff behind that too, you know, but it makes me think of that. And like, there's a strength that's often carried that is quite easily dehumanized, where it's like, oh, you're strong, you can take it. It's like the independent Black woman, like the strong Black woman. She's like, that's like I'm gonna say she as if that's not something I fall into, but like that is the trope of like, you can keep taking pain infinitely. You'll keep like, you're resilient. You know, there's been this kind of meme that's gone through social media where it's like, it's been both from Black men and Black women, where it's like, can we just have some softness? Can that be okay now? You know, do we have to keep being strong? And it's like, actually, you do have to keep being strong. It's kind of just helpful for you. But that softness is needed. And that softness is like first actually forgotten by the person, you know, holding the strength. Like, no, I gotta keep going. Like, I gotta keep going for my family. I gotta keep going for me. I gotta keep going for whatever. I can't count on so-and-so and so-and-so. Like, I gotta be able to like carry it. But you gotta also be able to have that softness and like have those things that you'll eventually be looking for other people to have. And then when you're looking for other people to give it to you, you can't even receive it because you haven't been able to give it to yourself. And so it's that same place of like being able to feel what's happening internally. Again, even if you're not even conscious of it, because that often is what happens. It's like, that response is very natural, and it's natural because it's innate. It's innate because it is incarnated in you. And then if it's in you, you're not going to give it much thought. But sometimes you have to know, like, this is why you're operating this way. This is what you're doing. This is where your strength lies. This is the amount of resilience you have. This is the amount of resilience you actually have. And so when life comes calling, as life often does, there are pieces in the Sutra where I was like, it hadn't struck me before, but there are these places where it's like, I think this may be charged, but in America, there's a lot of spots where people can turn a blind eye. And I think, there's almost a meme in Black culture where it's like, you can't look away. Like you have to be able to survive. You have to look at life in the eye. And that's not the case for everybody. But that is kind of like a meme, right? And so it's like, you have to know where you are on a certain map somewhere so that you can kind of keep going, so that you can stay safe, so that you can like know where you need to code switch and where you don't. Like, you actually have to be able to like feel that stuff out. Because if you're not in residence, you might wind up in jail. You might wind up shot on the side of the street. You might wind up walking through something you ain't supposed to be walking through. And that could be for everybody, but like, it's a thing. It's just a thing. Like, maybe you come from the suburbs and you move to the city and you have no idea, because you weren't around that. And then you have no idea and you don't know. And then you walk into a wrong situation, it's over. In some way, shape, form, or fashion, So it's actually being able to like really be not only in resonance with your environment, but you have to be in resonance with yourself first before you can actually be in resonance with your environment. And so that leads to the second point, which is like incarnation and connection. And it's like not just connection with the external, it's not just connection with other people, it's connection with yourself. You have to be connected to like what is actually happening inside of you. And I think, that's a lot of, when there's a stereotype of like Black people are lazy, like they're violent, blah, 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 blah. Like that's just a lack of connection internally to be able to aim all that power out to places that want it, that need it, that you want to do it, but you can't quite, because you can't quite get that switch on of like, I keep trying to do this thing. I keep trying to like create. I keep trying to like move this piece. I keep trying to like come up, but like I keep getting stuck in survival. And that happens to everybody. You know, it's like I keep getting stuck in having to survive. I can't thrive. I can't flourish. I'm just like, you know, I'm just at a point where I just like, I'm gonna sit here and be comfortable because like I can't find a way to win at my life. I can't find a way to like win at being me. And it's because like there's a disconnection internally. But then you have a bunch of power behind that, and then you're kind of like you're a little screwed. You're a little bit screwed. And so you have to like incarnate into your own life. And like I said, like there's this meme, and I think it's actually true, where it's like, it's almost the same thing. It was like, in this country, there are white people who could go days without seeing a Black person. But I can guarantee you there are very few Black people who can go a day without seeing a white person. Just point blank, period. You know, and so it's like there's a certain necessity of being able to know like what is happening in your environment, and then knowing how you are and like how you can operate in that environment. Or like, you know, are you gonna pop off today? Like you have to do that with your friends, like let alone people you don't know, you know? And so there's an intimacy, like you can't really have intimacy with another person if you don't have intimacy with yourself. It just always starts with the self. It just always starts with the self. It always starts with the self. It's hard to have connection with another person if you're not connected within yourself. You're not actually offering anything to anyone, right? And so being able to be embodied allows for things to kind of come through that that thinking does not. And those things tend to be involuntary. And those involuntary things tend to be the truth of who you are. And the truth of who you are is how you get intimacy. Well, if you can't face the truth of who you are inside before you tell another soul, it's really hard to kind of get that out to somebody else and have like an intimacy and a connection. And then again, like I keep saying, like, and then if there's power, if there's a bunch of power behind that, like it's going to come out eventually. And it usually just comes out in a kind of weirdly destructive way because you're not able to aim it because you don't have attention on it. And if there's any kind of, you know, if there's any kind of malady in Black culture, I say that is the basis of it. It has nothing to do with people are violent, people are like not as smart as, people just want to sit around and hang out. Who doesn't want to just sit around and hang out? Let's be real. Like, let's just be for real. And just hang out with your friends, you know? It has nothing to do with like stereotypes of Black people. It is literally, there's a bunch of power, and then there's often a getting away of the natural and innate abilities of the culture. That's pretty much it. That's it. And so we know that like when there's a move away from what is natural law, shit just gets wonky. Like it just chaos, you know, like it just gets weird, right? That is the entire world right now. We've gotten away from a lot of natural law and what is natural. And so shit gets weird. And that's what's happened. But through that, the beauty of, you know, the power that is there, the innate nobility and power that is there is that it still shines through quite often. And that is why, like, it is That's why hip hop is so globally desired. It is why like women want larger lips and bigger butts. You know, like it is why all those things are desired even before anyone can say, hey, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna use it and I'm gonna have it for me, but I'm gonna have it for me as if I just plucked it out of nowhere. And like I don't actually believe in assimilate, like I don't believe in like in appropriation. What I believe in is like there's gifts that we can offer each other. And if we don't internally know the value of those gifts, then nobody else does either. Even though they might know the value of it, it won't be said. It's not going to be acknowledged. You know, and so then everybody's kind of grabbing for all these different things that like don't necessarily fit. So when you have a contact with life, when you have to have a contact with life on some levels to be able to continue to have your family, you know, grow within generations to actually be able to continue those types of things, you have to like, for your own survival, you have to be embodied. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how far slaves were made if they had to just like think their way through everything. I don't think we'd be here. But to be able to bring the things that will keep us resilient and keep us safe, they had to have come from an innate knowing, an innate like being, an innate like unconditionality. Like this sucks and I got a few things I need to look at. Like, do I want to continue on? Will I be able to be free? Can I escape today? Like from there to like, okay, well, went to the school, got this job. Life looks great on the outside and I feel like crap. Okay, so what am I going to do about that? I still got to pay my bills. I like this. I actually like this house I'm living in. You know, I like my friends, but like my life does not feel right. Something's off. Something's off. So what do I do? You know, like I can't necessarily burn everything to the ground, but I have options and I have to actually genuinely look at what those options are from the inside out. What is it that I want to do? What is it that I want this short life of mine or long life or whatever life of mine to be? What am I hearing internally that no matter how much I try to quiet it, it won't stay quiet. It keeps coming up. What is it that I'm trying to like, what am I needing for my life to be my life? And for as much as savvy and beautiful as the mind is, it will lie to you in your own voice. And then it's like, you can have a sense that like something is rational and it makes sense. And A, B, step D, E, F, this all works out. This is right. You know, like my life is set up. I got the house. I got the relationship. I got the job. Like everything is great. I feel comfortable. And then internally, your being is screaming like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" You know. So it's like it could be either of those extremes, but it all starts internally. And so you have to have access to the internal. You have to have access to the non-rational. And creativity comes from all of that. And I think that, that's why there's such a great access to creativity, because you can't look away. You can try. You can, you can keep it gangster, go have a bunch of sex, have some drugs, there's so many things you can do, go get married. But eventually, it's funny, I read this thing where it was like, the more self-awareness you have, I've been reading a lot about desire lately. And it's like, the more self-awareness you have, the more dangerous it is. And it's more dangerous because then you can't continue to lie to yourself. And it's like that old Black grandmother where you kind of see like that old Black lady and you're like, I'm not gonna mess with her. Because she has gotten to a point where she's like, I can't lie to myself and I'm not gonna lie to you. And I think that's a lot of what Black culture is, where it's like, even if the stuff is kind of on top, in the creation especially, it's gonna come out, like the truth is gonna come out. And then it's intimate, that's very intimate. It's a very intimate kind of culture with each other and with the world. And so, it is that space where it's like, all fire is friendly because the truth is love. If it can be heard, it may not occur as love if it can't be heard, but that's all truth is. Honesty is another story, but truth is love. And so that fire, that truth can sometimes feel like, that intimacy that truth can feel like, is friendly fire for sure. And then it's like, so then life is asking to be lived on its terms. Like your life is asking to be lived on the truth of your terms. And, it's a lot easier now, but just as a culture, there's been no option but to see the truth of the reality of what's actually happening. And then you take your options from there. You make your choices from there. But life, you're embodied in I had a thought of embodied, right? It's dance, it's movement, it's whatever. There's all these things, but there's so many things you can do with the body, but life has to be lived from the body. All the stuff that you can do with the body is just extra gravy on top. That's just that's just like the sparkles and fireworks. So then we go to the third one, and it's like unconditionality and resonance. And then that's to meet and find resonance with life. If you have to kind of look at life, life is just life is like the cat that's sitting on your chest and it's opening your eyeballs in the morning. It's like, hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm back. Hey, you have to look at it. Then for it to be being alive is it's kind of painful. Being human is kind of painful. It's a little painful. And it's fun and it's got all, we have all these spots, right? But wow, this is a lot painful. It for sure, right? To be human is to hopefully to feel it all. But to have it be probably less painful, we'll put it that way, to have it be less suffering, for the sake of suffering versus suffering to actually free yourself into your own actual life, you're gonna wanna find some kind of resonance. You're gonna wanna be able to absorb what's happening, to convert it, and then to learn to love it and have approval, and then shoot it back out as love, right? And that's kind of like an edict of Eros, or the erotic path. But, and then like, no matter the conditions, no matter the conditions. But if you have, like there's a part in the book where it's like privilege is a disability. And I would say, like, when I think of privilege, I'm not thinking of like, white privilege or anything like that. I'm thinking about like comfort. I'm thinking about like any spot where you can sit in comfort and not see the reality of life. When you're in that is a disability. You don't have any resilience. You don't have any kind of way to like actually be in resonance with what's actually happening out here so that you can respond correctly. Like, so you can respond in resonance. And so if you don't have it in here and you don't have it out here, there's either more suffering to be had, or there's just more movement into comfort. And just as a culture, there's been more like that ability, like if, one of the, and I'm just going to say it in different words, but it's literally just something I was saying last week, where it's like one of the benefits or gifts of oppression is that we've had to learn to, as much, like you can say as much as you want to about like the current generation and like of any racial class or economic class, about how things are easier. And so you don't, everybody's more fragile and all this stuff. And part of that's true, where it's like you become more and more fragile the less you actually look at life in the eye. And so one of the gifts of oppression has been, you have to look at life. You have to look at life in the eyes. You have to face life. It just makes things, ironically, seem harder, but it just makes things actually easier. It actually like brings power. That is power. There's a sense of like powerlessness when you look out at everything and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is either going to cause me more suffering, so I got to like try to back off into like the privilege of not having to look at it and get more and more comfortable, which is gonna make not only this out here more loud and suffering so that you have to keep going further and further back, but then once you get further and further back, it's gonna be crappy in there too. But as a culture, there hasn't been we haven't been able to afford to do that. And so that gift, that's actually a gift. That's a gift. Like resilience had to be developed, cultivated. Being able to convert things had to be cultivated to like, like I've said before, like to be able to laugh, to keep from crying, like you have to be able to create, because otherwise you're just going to destroy. It's going to be so much that you're going to have to destroy something. Whether that be physical or spiritual or whatever, or mental or emotional, like something's going to have to be destroyed. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be your sense of self and your sense of self-worth. And so like the spots where there's this reaching out for like external validation of all sorts is a product of that. It's a product of like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what my value is. I need to get it from out here. There's a lack of incarnation inside of life, inside of your own life. And so when you have that unconditionality where it doesn't actually matter what's happening out here, like it matters, but like it doesn't change who you are as who you show up to be, it'll have impact on you. That might change you, that might hone you, that might make you more you, but it fundamentally doesn't change who you are if you're meeting life in a resonance, if you're offering what is actually needed, you will change if you're offering what is needed because you want to get something from it. But otherwise, you're living in a sort of like if you can get like, if there's that unconditionality, you actually get to experience the reality of life. It is, you don't get to have the delusion. You know, like you get to actually genuinely, fully, and authentically experience your life. And that is what makes great art. That is what makes superhuman feats occur. That's where beauty lies. And that is the beauty, that's where nobility lies. That is the beauty and nobility of Black culture. It is authentic. When it's keeping it real, it is keeping it real. You know? And so, yeah, I felt like I might have had another point in there, but I can't access it. So that must be my being telling me it's time to take reflections or thoughts, or we're at the 10-minute mark here. Yeah, if anybody has any thoughts, questions, if you have any concerns, you're gonna have to keep those. Yeah.
You can put your hand up and I'll spotlight you. Your digital hand. Michael looks like he's trying. There it is. Go ahead, Michael, come off mute.
I don't know why I got a yellow hand and not yellow. Great talk. I was able to listen to some of your talk last week about code switching, and that's opened my eyes a lot in my communications with people of color and amongst all different ranges of people, and like where, it's like, are they code switching? What's happening? It's like, where's the Blackness? They're like toning it down. And then there's other times where, it feels more comfortable and I can feel more of it, and in today's talk, I really see, there's a lot of what you're saying crosses over to the socioeconomic lines. I know a lot of what you're saying comes from a Black perspective, but I'm also noticing in lower socio and economic people when I work with them. There's like an attentiveness and a willingness and a surrender. It's like, they are like keeping pace with me, and also like looking ahead, like what's needed here, and it's something that I battle with my own pride in that area. So like meeting life on life's terms, I want life to be a certain way, but my life is the way it is. So it's like that for me, that's a mental construct, and to just be part of this talk. And I'm for sure not claiming any Black culture. Maybe I have some ancestors somewhere, but damn, it's like, yeah, I relate to so much of what you're saying. It's like, yeah, maybe yeah. So it's like, there's so much, there's such a treasure and wisdom in the Black culture that I feel that magnetizes me. Well, thanks so much for like how eloquently you're able to share it and openly relate to it, and also relate it to our sutras, where we can then digest it within ourselves and bring it down into our own body and our own experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Kara.
Thanks, Courtney. This was awesome. I love it. I loved it every week. And there was, well, one of the things that stood out to me today that you said, which is actually like a really hard thing for me to talk about, which is, you know, kind of like the racism of my family. And like, they would never call it racism, but they definitely said things that were incredibly problematic. And specifically when you said the kind of like the trope around, you know, Black people, they sit on the porch and they're loud and they, you know, they're violent. I don't know exactly what the words that you said were, but I know the words that my family has said, and specifically my mother. And you said that kind of image of someone, of that image of Blackness is a lack of intimacy with self. It's like a lack of intimacy with that thing that's perceived and a lack of intimacy with self. And, you know, I always thought it was so strange that my mom was so afraid of Black people. I was like, I just don't get it. Like, what's all the fear, you know? And my whole life. And then when you said that, I thought about it and I was like, wow, my mom has like, she's like claustrophobic. She won't get on airplanes. Like, she's just a fearful woman. Like, I don't think that it's necessarily like specific as I thought that maybe it was, you know? And I think that really rings true to me, that it's like a lack of intimacy with self. I think she really has that lack of self-awareness that would have her have intimacy with these things, have intimacy with her life. And then it's the fear is like the consequence of that. That stood out to me and has me see it in a different way.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. Lisa B.
Thanks again. I like look forward to this all. Yeah, and there's a way that like I always try to like trace it back to like, how do I show up inside of my heritage and my culture? And when you spoke about coming from a family of sweepers, I was like, and then I kind of traced that back to what you said about like doing something from a desire to do something and not because you have to do something. Yeah, and I was just like tracing back of like, oh, like what is in my family line that like naturally and organically might be inside of my body or my body's wisdom that is a gift to give back to people. And I've been trying to play with like the history of being Puerto Rican and spiritual practices around being Puerto Rican. There's definitely a desire to understand that more. And yeah, so I always kind of leave this call like in a state of inquiry. So it's good. Thank you.
I pulled it right, Joe. But yeah, I if there's like if there's inquiry or questioning or you know whatever, just like wrestling with reality, I love that. That would be my goal for any call I do. Awesome. Thank you.
And Harold. Harold.
Okay, yes, I just got on mute. Much of what you've been saying is not that different from the immigrant experience I had in this country. And as a German, I've lived in London for a good 10 years on 2 separate occasions, and I worked there for a number of different firms. And again, I've had
Oh, you want to mute somehow?
A lot of the experiences I had in London, working for several different firms, they all gave me the same sort of insights and emotional experiences that you described. So it's not unique to Black Americans. It's your authenticity is called upon if you want to weather the storms in a very aggressive manner in order that you can survive the hurricanes when they come, and they do come.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh.
Time for one more, Jana.
Well, first of all, thank you for, it's been like, I think it's been 33 years since I've taken the last like race relations or psychology of minority class. I had this crash on my professor and I followed him in every class he taught. And it would be like 17 young Black guys and me at the front desk with my hand up. Freaking them all out. But just two things real quick. With appropriation, I really appreciate your insight because I didn't know how to relate to that. Yes, I'm stealing, but I really like it. But so does that mean we all give back everything? And it's really understanding the value. So yes, benefiting and enjoying and the original owner knowing the value of what they've added to the culture is a really great way of looking at it. And the only, you said no concerns, but it's a concern. Yes, oppression and dire situation gives you certain strength, right? And ability to face things because you've been there. I just, I fear that message at the same time may take the responsibility off of the rest. Well, hey, they're so much better off now because they have so much pain, you know, like how to deliver that message so that while, you know, we praise, not praise, we acknowledge the extra strength that is born out of that suffering, but it doesn't mean that we should continue to suffer or make others suffer, you know, like
For sure.
how to look at that.
For sure. Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of what gets lost is like things are co-created. You know, things could go wild, could go or could have gone wildly differently or wildly different in many, many ways. But we are here the way we are here right now. And so I think everything is more about making sure that everyone sort of to the best of their conscious ability, take as much responsibility for the parts that they created. And that may not necessarily be, say like, it may not necessarily be the situation. It could be the way that the situation was responded to. It could be, you know, maybe the situation was responded to in any kind of normal, rational, sane way, but then there is a continuation of a response that isn't necessarily beneficial. You know, it's kind of looking at, it's a lot of nuance and it's really kind of it's not an easy spot, but it is something that kind of has to be parsed out. And I think it is not to, I would say like the main point in something like that is to, for sure, like make sure your side of the street is clean. And what I mean by that is like, make sure that you've done internally everything that you can do to be you, to be true to you and who you know you are versus like who anyone else says you are or who you're lying to yourself about who you are. And I think it starts from there. It's not simple at all. I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy by any measure of anything that is in this human life. Yeah, it is a tall order. It really is. It really is. Yeah, but I think that's really the only order.